All right.
Good.
Now we're live on YouTube. Awesome.
Perfect. So maybe a good place to start, Jacob, would be just introductions for those that
Yeah,
are tuning in for the first time. Do you want to introduce yourself first, and then I'll go?
for sure. Yeah, my name's Jacob Miller. I've been at Headway as the marketing and brand manager for about 3.5 years now. August was 3 years, so it's been an awesome ride. But my background was more traditionally in video production, photography. But in my free time, I figured out a way to kind of get into copywriting and writing and blogging and all that kind of stuff. Wrote my own ebook, had my own podcast, photography podcast for a bit. So I've just always been the kind of person that kind of has been involved in a lot of different types of media, and creating it like on my own, like not asking for permission kind of thing. Uh, and then just my previous jobs, I've created advertising for video and photo advertising for very large companies, smaller companies like local small business, in a corporate level and a smaller agency level as well. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Cool. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah. So Andrew, partner and CEO at Headway. I've played many different roles, both at Headway and on product teams in my career. So I feel like I can bring kind of a unique perspective to product, to design and development, and have kind of been involved at various levels with all of those. So before Headway started a handful or more startups, some that failed and ended miserably, some that are continuing on and still gaining traction in the market, and ultimately, here to help founders make progress. Whether you're an entrepreneur at like a corporate innovation team or a founder going out on your own and starting your own idea, here to really help be the guide we wish we had when we started. And our whole founding team, for those that don't know, are startup veterans and have been kind of around startups and been a part of raises, been a part of bringing new products to market. And so it's kind of where we enter the conversation. So part of that, if you're not familiar with Headway, I mentioned a little bit, but our mission is to bring entrepreneurial ideas to market and keep them there. And if you see the video on our site, we say this too, but keep them, their part is really important. And it's about, really understanding who the customer is, who we're serving, what problem are we solving for them. And continuing to hone that experience and hone the value props that you provide them over time. Because what we've realized and what you've likely felt as a consumer of products and solutions is that your expectations change over time. So whether that's trends or new things in the marketplace, like your expectations are always rising. So glad you're here to be chatting with us. For those of you that are, this is kind of your time to ask questions and to get help, get things answered. And in between, Jacob and I will kind of riff back and forth, but feel free to ask questions. And if you're on YouTube now and you want to join the call, there's a quick link to sign up here for Zoom to join us, and it'll be audio only. So no need to worry about your environment or space. It'll just kind of help give you the ability to ask questions and clarify via audio.
Yeah, so I actually have a question. So what was your first, I feel like I know you pretty well, but I just want to make sure, but what was your first digital product, and
Mm.
what was your expectations with it? And then what happened? How did it kind of either fail, or did you hand it off to somebody else, or what was that like?
Yeah, our first digital product was actually a nightlife platform that essentially, well, nightlife and events, and it was actually for Green Bay here, called 920, 920H for the area. And, we did what any first time founder does. We fell in love with our idea. At the time, I was just on the other side of college. And so we were building it, no joke, out of my mom's basement. So I was still playing football at the time and training. And so was staying with my mom, and we were, grinding late nights, working on this thing, and didn't really do, and this is like the big problem that a lot of people, or the big issue that a lot of people have the first time, is really thinking that if you build it, they'll come. And so that was a good case of this. We spent a year or so building a platform. This was in 2009. So it was really ahead of like Twitter's boom. It was ahead of Facebook's boom. Foursquare was a thing still at the time that was very, very heavy. But we spent a long time building it, and we had a launch party, and we had a bunch of our friends there. We didn't really have any clients there, but we had, a couple hundred people that came. We had, that's actually downtown Green Bay here, throwing high fives. Everyone's super excited about it. And when we went to the site over the next day and the next week, no one signed up. And when we went and talked to bars and restaurants and people that were supposed to be customers of this, nobody wanted it. There were people that didn't know what Twitter was, didn't know what, how to leverage Facebook, didn't really know about social proof or things like that. And so we actually pivoted it, saying like, oh, the platform's not it. Like, how do we build an audience? We started doing like themed nightlife crawls, so like bars, restaurants, that sort of thing, and scavenger hunts to like build up this demand from people. But ultimately, we let that product die. I think it's a good lesson in not focusing on customer development and doing product development first, and then also timing, like understand, like being able to read the room of the audience and like who you're selling to. Like you can't force timing on people, if they're not willing to adopt new things quite yet. Like it's going to be hard for you to do it unless you're a super influential brand that makes it extremely accessible, like Apple creating the first iPhone, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, and ultimately ended up killing it after about a year and a half of or maybe a year after initially launching and not seeing much traction. Kind of maintained it a little bit, but didn't see a ton of growth and didn't see a lot of opportunity there. So that was the first one that we started, and learned a lot. That was before the Lean Startup, which the Lean Startup I think came out in 2012 or so, but started to get inklings of like, there's a way to build stuff and this isn't it. So good experience overall, kind of like a butterfly or like a caterpillar, in the cocoon, like those growing pains of doing things the wrong way and seeing kind of the results later that, you put all this time and effort into building something that you think everyone's going to love, and they don't.
Yeah. So I actually have a question. You were talking about, and I thought about this before, just because you mentioned like before, it was 2009. So it was before a lot of things, a lot of tools even that now exist to help people do things faster and more effectively. Maybe talk about like market timing. Like how do you go about like understanding, is this the right time in the market? Like, I guess how would someone go about understanding that, like the risk of, is now the right time, or do we wait until the market's ready, or did we miss, or maybe it's too late? I'm just kind of curious what that's like.
Yeah, I think there's the whole adoption curve, that you've seen, like the bell-shaped curve, where you have early adopters, early majority, late adopters, all of those things. So I think that's part of it, like understanding how people adopt technology. But then the other angle you want to look at is like, how are people solving this today, and do they know it's a problem, right? Are you doing a double sell to say like, you have a problem and here's a solution? But from a demonstrated demand, it's like, what other tools are they using to do this? And not only do this, but like, what other tools are in their purview that they use? Like, are they using other digital tools to manage their business, if it's a B2B platform, that are similar to this, so that you can at least make connections? But if you go to somebody who's running their entire business on paper, and you say like, here's an app that tracks time, like they're still going to have to take that time and put it back into their paper. Like they're not ready to adopt, an entire like digital process quite yet. So I think like looking for indicators on how people are solving it now, whether that's manually, whether that's other digital products or things, and really like trying to understand what's the leap you're asking them to make. And in most cases, that's, they see that as an investment, whether that's additional money, additional time, confusion amongst their team. So like a lot of the B2B software that's out there is a huge change in behavior for a lot of teams and how they function. So like, imagine if we were to implement a new marketing tool, like it's not just like, oh, it's a brand new tool. It's, well, Jacob's going to get up to speed with marketing and the best practices on this tool. And then he's going to talk to Amanda and Miranda about it. And then we're going to bring it to L10, and then we're going to get everyone enabled. Then we have to connect all the accounts. Then we have to disable the old accounts, right? There's a whole lot of weight behind things, and there's a wake that's kind of left by it when you do want to make those changes. So I think like part of understanding the timing is like understanding how much more valuable is it than what they're doing. So kind of a few different indicators.
Yeah. Got it. Interesting. Yeah, and I know you mentioned this last week. You were talking about how there's been a couple different tools, including Kinetic, that have been like validated manually. So if someone's like looking to validate an idea that they have for a product, like what are the options to like manually validate that? Like, like I guess it depends on what they're doing, but
Yeah.
what kind of tools have you seen people use to do that?
Yeah, I mean, even as simple as just like a service, right? Like the people at the end of the day care about the outcome that you're trying to produce. Let's say, hey, I want to lose this. This may be a good example. I want to lose 20 pounds this year. So if I'm somebody who has specific knowledge around, let's say, diet, exercise, like rather than building an app that automates it and helps me scale that, like, can I sell it to one customer and can I have them reach success? Can I sell it to 2 customers, to 10, to 100, and be more manual that way, where, hey, you're managing their diet through other tools that are out there. Like you have them sign up for a MyFitnessPal and give you access. You have them sign up for like Fitness Plus and give you access, or things that aren't really relying on technology, but give you the data you need to ultimately deliver on the value, that value prop. So I think the first way, and we usually look to this for people that are trying to scale apps, is like, have you done it manually? Like, have you help someone achieve their goal through email, through an Excel spreadsheet, through sending PDFs, through things like that, that really know that, hey, customers are buying a different way, and really what they care about is the outcome. And so then you see, like, kind of in that space, some friends of ours, they just raised around Future Fit. I know Daniel over there is one of their designers, and they just raised a big round that essentially does that. It combines diet and fitness recommendations and a trainer to you via an app. But like starting with something that's already working gives you really the model for how you can deliver value to somebody, versus trying to create all of that and then codify it in an app. So many things change in the process that you're going to want to have it be more flexible. I think a lot of ways, like there's other examples where people are using like Airtable, Webflow, MemberSpace to really connect no code type tools together that really are using databases like Excel sheets to deliver value. And there's even some one that I came across that essentially delivers a list of things to you in an Airtable. Like that's your report. Hey, every week you're gonna get a list of Airtable contacts. Here's what that looks like. And that's a way that you can do it semi-manually, like automated in some ways, still personalize it, but not fully build your own app.
Yeah, got it.
So like from a MVP standpoint, it's like fake door tests, like putting a button there that doesn't do anything and seeing how many people click it to see if they're interested in a specific feature. What else? Like concierge MVP is kind of what I'm talking about, where maybe a user has a UI or something that they see, like a static page even, that you update on the back end. So it looks like it's software, but you're just updating like a database or like an Excel sheet on the back end that drives that user's experience. Wizard of Oz type tests that kind of help navigate, kind of almost like smoke and mirrors type, like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, that feels like a real product but is done more manually behind the scenes.
Yeah, what's the where you can book flights with partial payments? What's the
Affordable?
Yeah, Affordable kind of does that. They have like the manual kind of processing in the back. Just because
Yeah, so
there's
the
really
user plate.
yeah.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about?
No, you can go ahead. Yeah, you'd be able to explain it better than me. So
Oh no,
yeah.
so like the user logs in and they book what preference and flights that they have, and then their team on the back end actually fulfills the flight and then sends information back over to them.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting, like and they've reached pretty good scale. I don't remember the revenue number, but it was definitely impressive based on how manual the back end is. And I think that goes back to like, what's the process for, now, how do you know what people care about? How can you answer like to their questions and hesitations in the process? And software is usually just it's just a way to speed things up. It's not really a way to make things better in many
Yeah.
cases. Like if the fundamentals are wrong, the software is just going to amplify that.
Yeah. Got it. You were talking about like healthcare, or not healthcare, I guess like health tech in general. And I know we just actually had an episode of Seaworthy go out this week. And you did an interview with Michael Seidl from Advocate Aurora Health, and you just
Yeah.
talked about just how COVID-19 has been impacting just telehealth and just health technologies in general, and like how they're using kind of this like intense time to really like understand like how remote health can be better, healthcare. So maybe you talk about some of the discussions that you had with them in that episode.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about, obviously telehealth was a big topic of, adoption, and as he says in there, they were planning on 90,000 tickets being created through telehealth, so 90,000 kind of cases or transactions or things that doctors could act on. And now towards the end of the year, well, now that it's the new year, but towards the end of last year, it was around 900,000. So,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
think there's a lot of sentiment in the market where like that early adopter curve we talked about is now like shifted, right? Like most people are forced into adopting new technologies because there are no alternatives, like there are no substitutes for a lot. And so I think that's a good case where, for telehealth that, in any industry really, like on demand virtual is like key for you to be successful. And if you're behind the curve on that and you haven't planned ahead for those innovations, you're likely hurting a lot right now because you haven't diversified and you haven't like been able to meet customers where they are. It's part of that changing expectation, right? Could just be time, things changing over time, or it could be something sudden like COVID-19 that, hey, well, now the expectation is that I can get groceries delivered to my house anytime, right? And you've seen kind of a evolution from like all the stores on grocery pickup to like on-demand delivery to using things like Instacart, like integrating directly with those, where if the market was just going to play out and there weren't these times, like that would be extended. We also talked about in that episode kind of like a little bit of the quantified self. So how do you get real-time insights from patients and people that need maybe don't need hospital supervision but need to be monitored? Hey, we have some concerns, maybe you have high blood pressure and we're concerned about XYZ. You can get more holistic care by not having these point in time measurements where, hey, every 3 months I go into the doctor and like that week ahead, like I could impact my scores, right, on my health tests by like eating better, or like the 2 weeks ahead I like change my behavior, but you miss the snapshots in between. You know what I mean? Where you're actually getting like true data and you're seeing trends and you're seeing how people are eating, how they're sleeping, and how those are impacting what they do. And so I
Yeah.
think that's super powerful. Otherwise, like your doctor literally has limited information and they're making recommendations based on, hey, today, like what did the scale say? What did the caliper say? What did this reading say? Like, and then compare that to last time, whether that was 3, 6, 12 months ago, and then make recommendations for, well, it seems like you're trending up. Like I would recommend this. It just makes it more actionable and more, I think, going away from, in the US here, we have um, a big problem with like seeming and being very reactive to healthcare. This kind of brings it to how do we be more preventative and more proactive in
Mm-hmm.
healthcare, and how do we get real-time readings that then you can pile on, AI or ML like onto recommendations where you're watching really levels and really codifying what doctors have been doing manually. That's another good example. What doctors have been doing manually over the years on their recommendations for, hey, well, generally we have guidelines from American Heart Association. It says XYZ. We have guidelines from, this other association, and you can start to then inform people and educate them in time, like rather than every 3, 6 months. Part of that feedback loop is, hey, if I want to get healthier, how can I do that in real time versus like measure every 3 months and then be like, oh yeah, I thought I was doing better, but I'm not. You know what I mean? You don't actually get that. So I think things like the Apple Watch, and there's even other ones out there for, um, you know, diabetic patients and things like that give you more
Mm-hmm.
real-time readings, like give you the information you need to know so you can change what you do.
Yeah. I think one thing that's also interesting is there a lot of the I can't remember the company, but the trend around just understanding like allergies, not necessarily like fully allergic, but like inflammation and stuff with certain foods. Like what are those take home tests? And I like
Yeah.
understanding like the real time implications of like certain foods that you eat. I know like with diabetics, like that's obviously like you can just track blood sugar, but I wonder if there will ever be a way to like in real time understand, besides from just doing like the blood test, real time understand like, hey, you're having this food, your body temp went up like half a degree. That
Right.
actually might actually mean something, even though it's not showing up on the blood test or
Right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
lot of factors that are correlated, and part
Yeah.
of that is somebody to really drive what that algorithm is, like what's the process that tells us when something's off, or what's okay,
Mm-hmm.
and doing like those clinical trials where, hey, no matter what you eat, even if it's not a inflammatory, no matter what you eat, your body temp raises because it goes into digestion mode, raises
Yeah. Yeah.
point
It's
two.
true. Yeah.
So if you see any like variance outside of that, low or
Yeah. Yep.
high, like you get indicators.
Well, even like like if you're creating goals for yourself, like predict based on like if it has past data about you, based on your past data, if you eat like this and exercise like this each day, you should hit your goal, like your
Yep.
fitness goals. I'm sure there's obviously different things that you could put besides just weight. You could have muscle mass, or percentage of fat and stuff, all that stuff. But it'd be kind of interesting just to see, like, because not everyone might lose the same amount of weight the same speed, because metabolism's different if you're older. Just understanding
Yep.
all that stuff and having like a really easy, predictable tool for people, I think like gives them. I also think it makes it more uh, realistic, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can lose 10 pounds in 30 days. And
Mm-hmm.
like that might, like, if you did that 10 years ago, like it might not be the same results now if you follow that same plan, because your
Right.
body's different or something. Or that last 2 pounds is always the hardest, because like it's just, you have less mass, so your caloric intake's different and all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
interesting.
interesting too to like, what you measure improves. So like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, weight loss challenge 30 days, and we actually have one going on with my brothers and their families, like a wellness challenge, not weight loss, but like body composition change. And so one of the things was like, hey, we need to have a long time horizon, so it doesn't include like crash diets, like
Yeah.
48-hour
Yeah.
Hollywood things, because um you could lose a ton of water weight in 30
Mm-hmm.
days and then like pack it all back on, like through
Yeah.
water retention and things you're eating. But so I think that's a key factor of like balancing more than one metric to like guide you down the health path, so to speak. So
For sure. Well, if anyone has any questions, I see there's some folks watching on YouTube in the stream. Thanks for being here. Hopefully, you find this health tech conversation enjoyable. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, would love to hear them. Whether it's design, development, product strategy, um, or just maybe anything with your business. We'd love to just help unpack the problem, see if we can help you out.
well, sounds good. So
No,
so
yeah,
there
we can keep
was
going.
yeah there was a question actually that I had from a one-on-one from an entrepreneur, and he was tackling I don't forget if we talked about this last time. We was tackling like a Uber Eats style, um, DoorDash style thing in a new country. Their country doesn't have it. It's a brand new thing, and he was saying, hey, I can't get it started because I need a CTO. The CTO we have now, is only working a couple hours a week. He can't really commit time. We need a CTO to really launch this business. And one of the things I chatted with him through is like, well, have you talked to people? Are they willing to order, from a site and deliver? Have you talked to restaurants? And, that's the big crux of a lot of businesses is like, sure, you could build an app, but then you built an app first and now you have to back into who your customers are and what the value prop is. So the recommendation I had for him was to start really small. And I think we've actually seen this in our area with like food dudes in Wisconsin here, but like start really small. And like the founding team, like, why don't you all deliver? Like, go talk to restaurants, go talk to end users, and try to gain interest just in your own town, and see like, hey, we're trying a brand new technology in a new country and in a new area. Is this desired, for this area? Like, should we even automate this first? And so his issue kind of went from, how do I find a CTO to build an app that I'm not sure people want, to how do we go test a value prop and do it manually, kind of to your point earlier of like doing things manually. Like, could you get 5 restaurants and then also get a few hundred people that are going to order from those restaurants, and you and your founding team go directly and, or split those up, like, and maybe limit the time from, hey, we do orders from 11 to 5 p.m. or 11 to 6 p.m. and just start it out small to start learning about the desirability in the market. And you could do that through like a bubble page. You could create other types of menus or things where maybe when you talk to the restaurant, they'll let people know that they now have delivery, but they just forward you their order, and then they tack on whatever the order fee is for you. But there's ways to do it manually where you can start in a brand new spot. Even when you think about like Uber, you think about Uber Eats, of people moving and picking up orders and delivering it to people. They started somewhere, and it wasn't like everything at once. And so like, could you start small, start doing it manually, learn a lot about the restaurant experience, learn a lot about kind of the orderer experience, and then like, once you have a good process down, codify that into an app to help you scale. But don't codify any of those variables that you're not sure of yet into an app that's just going to amplify like, hey, this is a really bad process. Now we have 1,000 people on here, and like, we can't actually get them their orders because we didn't understand that restaurants do this way, or these restaurants have these point of sales. Like, uncover the constraints, make sure you define who your early customers are, and then kind of work the other way, do it manually, and then go into an app.
Yeah, for sure. Trying to think of another question. I had one before, but I lost it when you were talking. I've been writing down things to help me keep track of that, because we go off topic a little bit sometimes. Yeah. I think something that is interesting is I feel like a lot of people, when they have an app idea, I feel like it can be anybody. They just like start talking like, oh, they should build a tool that does this, tool that does that. And there's a lot of assumption around that people would actually pay for it, because there's this whole kind of now new model of like, things are free. Like, for example, like Facebook is free and Instagram's free. There's a ton of tools that do other things that are just more service based that are actually free, that people make open source. So like, how does one go about understanding like if people actually want to pay for it, or understanding like, if you offer a free model, like, what are ways you can use that free model to generate revenue as well? Like, is there, maybe it's free to the customers, but is there a way to like take that data to unpack something else, or like, just trying to understand, I guess, what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff, where it's like free products versus, I know obviously Facebook and all those companies do advertising, have all that data power, but for someone that's very small, what's the advantage of like a freemium, maybe like starting free, like a tier model versus like asking for money right away?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing, like, what are ways to test if people are actually willing to pay something, like pay for a solution to something? So, without going deep into like the research, but starting with the customer. Hey, who are we serving? What specific problems do they have? What are their pains and gains? And a lot of times we'll use the strategizers value proposition canvas that kind of creates these customer profiles, and then you can create like a solution model that pairs to them. But essentially, like, trying to learn enough about the problem that you can speak their language. They've admitted it's a problem, they know it's a problem, and you can really understand where their perspective is. Like, what other things are they using? We talked a little bit about before, demonstrated demand, what are the substitutes and things that they have. And then like our recommendation would be to get an offer in front of them. So like take those insights you had from talking to all these customers and problem interviews and problem discovery, and then put them into a landing page test, put them into maybe even like a prototype test. And we've done this, with both B2C and B2B companies, where we put an offer together, and because we understand the value and the pain that it's going to help them alleviate, like we can sell on that. So we've sold directly through landing pages by accepting money. Usually do like, no, nobody wants to just go and buy something that's not available yet. Like you always be like, oh, I'll wait when it's out. But if the value prop's clear enough, and if you're can create like an enticing offer of why they should buy now versus later. Like, one example was buy 3 months, get 3 months free of this subscription consumer software that we did. And that was really successful. So like being able to do that and repeat that. And with enterprise, it'd be getting letters of intent or purchase orders and really aligning with, a small group of small B2B customers that are going to help you iterate the product, learn more about the problem space, understand why they do or don't want things a certain way, and push those forward. So that main way is to essentially just make an ask. A lot of people will fail to do that and just say like, oh, would you use this? And people are flawed. It sounds great. Hey, would I use it? Yeah, I would use it. And then when you ask somebody to put up money for it, they say, well, and then you start to uncover the constraints of like, well, we don't have a budget this month for that, or our budgets happen yearly, and I have to put in a capital expense request for this. Or you start to learn about like how people buy, and that's really what you want to suss out up front, so you can speak to it. You can figure out how your offer or solution has to change in order for them to actually come through and be motivated enough to purchase something.
Yeah.
The other question you had real quick, I know we have a question here, just to answer, like, what are some of the models that can support free?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a freemium model, it's a longer tail. Like you have to make a bigger investment, which is why I think typically you see larger investments for companies that are free that want to grow really big, right? Whether that's a social network or whether that's really anything free. Like you have to support the growth with funding versus revenue. Because the revenue is a lagging indicator. A good example of that is, your people are the product if you're doing ads. But you can also support it via sponsors. Like if you had something that supported a community, Kinetic is an example. Like one route you could go is to have sponsors from Adobe or Envision, or sponsors that are in this space like Strategizer. You could also run your own affiliate campaigns. So being able to sign up for like Amazon affiliate networks or direct product affiliate networks, and really serve a curated list of products to the audience of your app, and be able to get paid on a CPA or CPL, like cost per acquisition or a cost per lead or a cost per sale basis, where you're managing this offering for them, but you're going to generate revenue instead of something like a Google ad network that pays per impression.
Mm-hmm.
These ones would pay like per action. So your bet there is like really trying to offer things that are hyper relevant to whatever your app or product or service does, and that's a way to support free as well.
Got it. All right. You want to answer Mukesh's question here?
Yeah. Makesh's question is, hi, these days we can see a lot of startups are doing quite well with the funding they get, but I feel most companies are burning the money. How come investors don't care about profitability? That's a good question. I think there's a lot of investors out there that have big funds that are willing to take big bets, right? Or maybe have a good example is like they have wins under their belt that can fund bigger bets in the future, where it almost feels like they're playing with some of the house's money. Right, where like they get outsized returns on investments that they made in the past that maybe were a lot safer, like Uber in the early days or Airbnb. They got in really early for $10,000 and now it's worth billions. That can kind of fuel some of that, but also this feeling that like funding is an indicator of success. I think for a lot of companies, like the publicity it brings, it can bring new customers, it can bring new visibility into a market based on funding rounds and things like that. But I think, for the most case, a lot of the companies that are investing big money, they're investing in, on a 10 to 20-year time horizon where they see something that has potential to not only 10x, but multiples of that in the future. And so I think it's hard to balance. There's a good dichotomy between Midwest investors in Wisconsin and Chicago and Minneapolis, and investors on the coast here in the United States, where you're in Silicon Valley or in New York. It's much more, I would say, much more traction based and less speculation. So like traction based in the form of customers, in the form of revenue, in the form of partnerships. If you can build those up, like you can build a valuation based on a predictable model, versus something on the coast, like you might be able to raise money just on the speculation that this is in a similar space as this company. And you really, like, part of it's storytelling, like who is this company most like, and what's the revenue generating potential of this company if it were to get even just a fraction of that. So I don't know why investors care about, don't care more about profitability up front. I think it's more about their, see, a lot of these are diversified based on fund. So a lot of their investments, they're not just a one-off investment. It's usually a syndicate of many investors and LPs into a fund, and that's just one of their bets. It might be 10x of what their normal investment is, but they're still diversified it from a portfolio level, in many different things in a much smaller scale. And so I think that can fuel some of it. Would be great to have some VCs maybe on the, not really a show, but on the office hours here, where we can get some investment advice and thoughts from folks that are cutting big checks on what they're looking for, from a return perspective.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today, to start having a rotation of folks, open topics, kind of AMA with us and them as well. I think that'd be a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Mukesh, but hopefully talked a little bit around some of the factors in it and why they might not care as much about profitability today versus later. I think most people think like you can iterate into a valuable solution, but I think companies like Uber, I'm trying to think of some other ones out there that aren't super profitable, are not turning any profit, rather. Like the reach of them is attractive, and like, so I think the idea is like, if you can get people and get an audience, like you can test business models, and you're like one factor away from getting to profit if you can really find a niche angle with that market.
Awesome. That was a great question, Mukesh. So thanks for sharing that. Awesome. Yeah, maybe thinking about investment stuff. So, if someone's never, even considered the idea of talking to an investor, what would you feel like are good first steps for, understanding what investors look for, like where to find them, what to expect when you meet with them, preparations and stuff? Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, if you've never met, I think like talking to other founders about their experiences is a good proxy, and like finding people who have done or are doing what you want to do, and kind of like piggybacking on their learnings. Who are they talking to? What have they found? But a lot of companies now, a lot of investors would be more transparent just with the amount of deal flow or startups that are out there looking for money on like, hey, where do we play and where don't we play? And like, what are our check amounts? Do we invest in pre-seed, series, seed, series A, series B? Where do we look to invest? And there's some good sites out there. I guess some paid sites like PitchBook's one of them that comes to mind, where like all the deals that happen that are get documented there, but they are paid in most cases. Crunchbase is another idea to, if you have companies that are in the space, to understand who's raising money, you can do some due diligence there and really uncover that. As far as like process, like some of the recommendation we give is to make intros early to investors to try and start building a relationship before you have, really a compelling offer. But obviously, if you have a compelling offer, that's one as well. But from a relationship building standpoint, like I think there's really good case for you talking to investors early and then like doing what you said you were going to do. Like, hey, here's our plan, this is what we're going to do, and then like following up in 3 months and like giving an update or sending an email update of like, hey, I mentioned we were going to do this, we actually did it. Because I think where investors might get not annoyed but like lose trust is when you say something and then like you haven't worked on it for 2 years and like, oh yeah, I still want to do that, and like it just shows it's not a priority for you. And so I think some investors um, will really appreciate like those continuous updates, whether or not they continue to engage, but building an investor list that you can then just email updates to on a monthly or quarterly basis as you make progress. From a pitching standpoint, I think there's a lot, probably too much to dive into here, but essentially like you want to get to the point with your customers where you say one sentence about what you do and they're like, oh yeah, right, they get it, like you understand the pain point. And I think if you can start to gain and build up anecdotal stories of customers that have said like, yeah, we really want this, here's why what we're doing can't work, and you have customers pitching to you, that's a good indicator that you're like onto a pinpoint of what you can bring to an investor. Is like if you're in a conversation and someone sells you why your solution's best for them, like perfect, they get it, it's clear, you're onto something. It's not just like, well, maybe we'll take a look and I'm not sure, and they're saying like, yeah, we need this because like we can't do XYZ without it, or like it's prohibitive for us to do that. But from an trying to think from a resource standpoint, what would be helpful, there's probably some links that we can send out, Jacob. We've been working on that startup resource guide for people that are fundraising, how to think about term sheets, how to think about valuations, how to think about just a process for pitching. But some investors are still investing on napkin sketches, like just an idea on a piece of paper, whatever that looks like. But I think in most cases, a lot of investors are moving more towards traction, which goes a little bit against what you said, Mikesh, and what I talked about. But I think unless it's a really big play that you can attract investors on the coast, gaining traction in the form of customers, usage, adoption, revenue is going to be your best bet to tell a really compelling story for why your idea, your solution is going to be, something that people should invest in. Really you're competing with all the other ideas that they hear, right? You're not just competing, hey, is my idea good? You're kind of in comparison with a lot of opportunities that they have on their board at any given time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I don't think we have any more questions coming in, so I think we can wrap it up. Feel pretty good about the conversations we had today, and but yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. You have about a minute if you want to throw a question up before we wrap it up and close the doors. But we do have some events coming up next month that we do want to share. I'm actually going to grab the event page just to get it up here. I can show folks what we got coming up for February. Share my screen. All right, so if you go to headway.io and head to our events page, and we have actually on our YouTube channel, so if you subscribe, you'll see these upcoming live streams. But on February 11th, we have, for all those developers out there, we have a conversation about React Native and React navigation with TypeScript. Jess from our development team will be walking through that process and how you can get started with that. And then also, we have a great one on February 18th with Ryan and Clint. So Ryan's on our strategy team. He's the head of product, and we also have Clint from our design team. Oh, actually, that's broken. That's not fun. But anyway, we'll fix that today. But we're going to be talking about from idea to venture launch. We'll be talking about prototypes and feedback loops. So Ryan and Clint will be walking through a case study with a project we've been doing called Ditto. That's going to be launching soon. And they'll walk through the entire process of customer interviews, like the prototyping process, like when you get feedback, how do you analyze it and synthesize it to understand what to do next with that information. They're going to talk about a quiz campaign they created to help get leads, to get customers in, to understand, is this something people are willing to pay for, or what do they find valuable? So we're super excited to have that. But if you head over to our YouTube channel, we'll be able to, you can actually subscribe or get a notification on that event is here. So you can go click set reminder, and you'll get notified on that event, and you can join us on the live stream. All right. Always got to be one bug on the website we got to fix.
Yeah. Thanks for going over that stuff, Jacob.
Yep.
And the question, Mukesh, and if folks have other questions that kind of as they're thinking about their idea, or a team that you're on, feel free to send that over to ahoy@headway.io, and we'll make sure that gets answered, or book some time and we'll chat through it. So thanks again to everybody. We'll chat next week.